listeners, welcome to another episode of the Snowy's Camping Show. If it's your first time listener or watcher, or even if you've been with us before and haven't done so, make sure you subscribe via your favourite podcast app or via YouTube. We are talking today with Lauren's here as usual, but we've got a face that you may recognise from other YouTube videos, and possibly if you've been into our store here in Adelaide.
Pilots and preachers.
we've got with us Kevin Leslie. Now, Kevin, you and I have worked together for almost 10 years now. We were just talking about that. And at Snowy's in the store, and you're still working for us here at Snowy's.
I am, yes.
We brought you in today because heaps of listeners have asked us, Lauren, about caravanning. Tell us about caravanning. Now, Lauren and I are not caravanners.
Not at all.
Kevin got dragged in.
Yes, I did.
I think he was willing, but he's here now, so we've got him. So talk about the basics of caravanning, just getting into caravanning. But
that's right.
Now, you've got a fair history in caravanning. Have you worked for caravanning? We've got a little book here in front of you and the picture on the front.
Yes, I wrote a book about caravanning and camping in Australia, which is basically just a handbook. It basically shows everyone who's never been caravanning or camping before just what the basics are, what they might want to look out for, just to get them into the idea of what they might be looking for and help them start up.
Yeah, you literally. I was like on the front of the book. I'm going to hold it up if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
On the front of this book here is Kevin's amazing car, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's your car. I think it's a Defender, and it looks like an absolute babe of a vehicle.
It is.
That's not what you said before.
What are you? The Defender?
I thought you were paying out his car.
I was excited.
Okay. Like, my mistake. I misread that conversation.
That's like my dream car, literally, except probably in like a navy blue, I reckon. Anyway, okay. And you mentioned, I was like, oh yeah, with your Caravan, you were like, yeah, I built that Caravan.
That's right, I did.
So you built the Caravan from scratch?
I built the Caravan from almost scratch. I had the chassis built from by a engineering company who builds off-road trailers and things, and I'm not a very good welder, so that's my downfall. I was frightened of something falling off it, so I got it built for me.
And you spent a year building that?
I spent a year building the rest of the Caravan on top of it, yes.
Yeah, right.
It's in my shed.
And that was following, you were just telling us, following a trip that you did with your wife over a year, sleeping in a 3-person tent around Australia.
We spent a year almost, or 9 months, I think, travelling around Australia in a four-wheel drive with a 3-man dome tent. And on the last leg coming back, we decided we were kind of getting a bit tired of putting up the dome tent every time and putting it down and looking for a nice flat spot and no ants' nests or rocks or things. And then on our second last night out, a big storm came out and basically flattened it.
Yeah, right.
And we had to pick up this sodden mess about 4 o'clock in the morning and throw it in the back of the car with all the rest of our sodden gear because it would rain, and it was a shocking night. And we sort of saw other people camped in the same spot in caravans. I thought, gee, they look nice and cozy in there. So we sort of looked at each other and said, yes, definitely. Next big trip is down to be in a caravan.
And then you built your caravan.
Yep, that's why we built it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
What made you want to build your own caravan? I mean, obviously there are a lot of caravanning options. You've never bought a caravan before, and you're just like, I'm going to build my own.
I decided to build it because going back, I started in the industry about 34 years ago.
Okay.
And I worked for a fairly major repairer in Adelaide. And of course we saw all sorts of issues with vans coming in with problems. We did relining, we did floor plans, we repaired damaged caravans, everything. And of course, as you pull them apart, you see, well, that looks a bit weak there. And this isn't right there. And then we had warranties as well. So over the period of years working on the floor, you sort of see all these things. And then I started looking around, and what we wanted was way too expensive.
Yeah, right.
It's a specialised, it's kind of what they call a crossover van. It's not really a camper trailer, but it's not really a full-size caravan either. And they were sort of way up in the many zero sort of figures. So I looked at what the cost of the materials would be, and I thought, well, I've got time and I've got the space and I've got the tools and things. So, yeah. I drew one out on the shed floor in chalk, and I started to build one.
That's amazing. So it's not like you essentially went from sleeping in a dome tent and never even touching or looking at a caravan to deciding to build one.
No.
You've been in the caravanning industry for a long time.
Yep. I sold vans. I was a manager of the spare parts and accessories area for about 5 or 6 years for another dealership. But I've been out there quite a bit. I've travelled quite a bit myself ever since I was a little kid in nappies.
Yeah, right.
Dad and Mum would take us on camping trips in the back of Dad's truck. He drove a truck for a brewing company in Sydney.
Yeah, okay.
And gates and tarps, and that's what we'd sleep in the back of.
Yeah, wow.
I can't remember much of it, but there's lots of photos of this little guy running around in nappies, and that was me.
Oh, wow.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I guess you probably highlighted a heap of things that those who are just getting into caravanning now are probably hearing, like you saying you pulled things apart and seeing it's a bit weak there, or that needs replacing, or that should be improving. I guess we're trying to. I mean, people aren't just going to be able to make one decision and then everything's perfect, right? There's things to think about.
Yeah, that's right.
So we're trying to cover today on those people who are saying,
just sort of like it's essentially we want to do an intro to caravanning, really, don't we? Because a lot of the feedback that we've got for the podcast is people wanting to know about caravanning, but a lot of them are actually people who haven't already got a van. They want to possibly upgrade.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously with the last 18 months that we've had in Australia here with travel, different sorts of travel being so restricted.
That's right. Yeah.
Caravan, camper trailer sales going through the roof. Someone in Western Australia was telling me that there was a point there towards the end of last year where you could not buy a single caravan in Western Australia at all. Not even secondhand, not Gumtree, not in a car yard, gone, 100% sold out.
Yep.
So obviously there's a demand for it, and people are starting to think maybe they've camped before but they want to do it more often and their own setup isn't necessarily sustainable, it doesn't suit their needs or whatever. So we just sort of want to cover the basics of how people can upgrade from a camper trailer or a tent into a caravan, what they need to look out for.
Sure.
So what do they think of first? I mean, your caravan, right? You can think of as little small caravan, or like there's massive things out there that cost a lot, and there's a lot of choice. So what if someone comes in when you were working in the caravan floor, so I don't want to get into caravanning, where do they start? What's the first question they should ask themselves?
There's lots of things to consider, I suppose, your own personal choice, whether you want a large van or a small van, if there's a family or if it's just a couple. Some couples want a big van because they like the space, but one of the first thing I would suggest is they look at the car they're going to tow it with, because cars have a towing capacity and they have a download capacity on the tow ball. There's lots of things to consider with weights of caravans. You've got your gross vehicle weight, your gross combined mass, you've got your tear, your aggregate. That can get very confusing. But for a new person looking at it, just look in your handbook, find out what your car can tow, what it can legally tow, how much it weighs, and put that to what you would call a loaded caravan. So if your car's rated at 1,800 kilos, for example, that's the heaviest the caravan can be that you're going to tow with that vehicle.
And, of course, that's not the drive out of the yard caravan weight. That's the loaded, fully packed weight.
With everything in it, the water, gas, food, clothes, any other accessories you might want to put in it, camping gear, tables, chairs, that sort of thing all goes in it. So that's what the maximum weight your car can tow. There's also the download capacity, which is how much weight your car can carry on a tow ball. In general, the download capacity is about 10% of the caravan weight. So if your caravan weighs 1,800 kilos, you've got about 180 kilos in general. It will move up and down a little bit. So your car has to be able to handle that as well. And I know there are vehicles out there that may have a very high towing capacity, but very low tow ball capacity.
Can I just ask quickly what the difference is?
The towing capacity is what it can tow on the road. So the weight is being supported by the caravan.
Yep.
The download capacity is how much weight there is on the drawbar of the caravan that's pushing down on the back of the car.
Okay.
So they're the caravans that you see, they're not level like this, right? The caravans down this, the cars like this, they're driving like this. Yeah. That's when they've exceeded their tow ball capacity. It's got to be level.
It should be level. Now, some of those capacities are with towing aids. Now, towing aid is what the proper term is, a weight distribution setup, which means it distributes the weight from the back of the car. It distributes the weight further forward. So therefore the car goes from that like that, it'll go back level. And that's what the ratings are. So you really need to check what the ratings are and just find out what you can and can't tow. Because some cars can't tow anything without a distribution bar, a 750 kilo box trailer that they take to the trailer, to the rubbish dump, take to the garden centre.
So that sounds like it's like your first thing is just work out what you can tow. And if you want to tow more than
you got to upgrade the car.
You've got to upgrade the car, which is could. I don't know whether the equaliser thing you're talking about, that's probably not a cheap upgrade.
It's not cheap,
but you might
either.
Be up for a few grand just to start with.
There's different ratings for those too, from as low as like 80 or 90 kilos right up to 350 kilos.
Right.
Yeah, so this also sounds like a pretty complec subject in and of its own right. So I think in my mind, I'm thinking we probably need to do another episode just on this.
So, I probably talk quite a lot about it.
That's right. Well, we've covered GVM and stuff before, but I reckon probably an all-encompassing thing because it does get complex. So
it is.
And I'm assuming that information is also fairly applicable even with camper trailers or like hard shell camper trailers. So it's not just caravan specific.
It's
so
any trailer. You could have a furniture trailer on. You could have a boat. It could be any trailer at all. They still follow the same rules.
Okay.
I'm just making a note of this.
On that, right, caravan or camper, I'm sure anyone kind of getting into camping, they've never done it before, they don't want to do tent, they're looking at other options. There's caravans and there's camper trailers, right?
That's right, yes.
I mean, camper trailer is that something you've had a lot of first-hand experience in? I'm assuming if Caravans tends to just be a caravan shop, right? Not many brands do caravans and campers. It's one or the other.
Yeah. So, well, I haven't had a camper trailer, but I've seen a lot of them, obviously. The difference really is you're going from a tent. If you want to go up one step, you'd go up to a camper trailer.
Mm-hmm.
The advantage of the camper trailer is you've got a trailer which carries most of your gear.
Yeah.
And there's different types. There's soft floor, hard floor, wind up. There's all different types there, and you'd have to choose which suits you. But you're still under canvas to a certain degree. Some of them you're under canvas completely. And some of them you've got a hard roof, which is your wind up type of camper, but then you have got canvas sides and ends. So if you want to get away from canvas, you've got to go for a caravan. But the camper trailer is still a good option. It's a lot less expensive than a caravan and easier to tow as well. Yep. And as I said, you don't have to pack it up every time. Most of your gear is in the camper trailer, just like it would be in a caravan. So it's not like you got to open the shed, get the tent out, get the chairs out, get this out, get the stove and all that sort of thing.
It's still convenient.
It's still convenient. It just takes a little bit more to set up. Probably, I mean, if you look at the space you get in a camper trailer, it's probably equivalent to a family-sized tent. Now, a family-sized tent can take over half an hour to set up. Some camper trailers can take that long or a lot more. It just depends on the setup. So you really want to look carefully at the setup and whether or not you're going to gain anything from towing just a trailer with your camper gear in it or to a camper trailer.
It can be deceptive, I think, camper trailers, because I've seen friends set up, they pull up at the same time as me, and I just set up an RV tent.
Yep.
And they're still setting up their camper trailer long after my tent's been set up because I've got 4 guy ropes and a couple of poles, and I'm all good to go.
That's right.
They've leveled the camper trailer, flipped the ends out, folded the canvas out, set the main bit up, putting the annex out, and then there's all the pegs to put in around it. So it's quite a bit of work. But a caravan is simpler. Usually, I think pegging points, if you've got any, is really just an awning. No pegging points.
Unless you've got an awning or an annex on the side. If you're just having an overnight stop, you basically park it. Try and get it level if you can. There, wind the jockey wheel up and down. Put down your corner stabilizers, and if you're in a caravan park, you just plug in your power and water, and that's it.
Yeah.
If you're bush camping, obviously there's no power and water. Your van's already set up to be self-supporting. So, the first time I took our caravan away, we went to a bush camp, and I pulled up, and we got it set up, and I stood there and I looked at my wife and I said, "Is that it?" And she said, "Yeah, that's it. It's set up. Come and get the bottle of wine." That's what we did. So it took like 5 minutes for me to set the whole thing up. And here we have our bed made. We've got the kitchen is inside there. We've got out some chairs and tables set outside on the beautiful apartment. That's actually where that photo was taken.
On your very first trip?
That was the very first trip.
That's awesome.
So that's the maiden.
That was the maiden watch for the whole thing. Yeah.
So it made it to the first campsite.
It made it to the first camp. Quite okay, yeah.
That's awesome.
On bush camping and caravan park, there are different caravans, right? Is yours made for off-road, or is it?
It is.
It is.
It is. It's made for off-road, yes.
So what do people look for there if they want to, there's some caravans, dirt roads maybe, but what are the limitations? If they want to go to remote places, Unadata track, that type of thing, what do they need to think of?
I suppose what you really need to think of is what you're hoping to get out of the van, out of the trip. As I said, my van is set up completely. I don't need to go into any power sites at all, ever. I've got panels on the roof. I've got batteries inside. We have shower, hot water service, twin gas bottles, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're going to go on rough roads, yes, the van does have to be set up for it. It depends on the road. Now, you mentioned the Unadata track. That's a dirt road. It's not so bad. A caravan should be able to go along there quite safely. But if you're going to go like out to Lake Eyre, that's quite a rough road. The problem with caravans is that the suspension and the chassis and everything underneath is not really designed to go pounding along on corrugations and rocks and going through deep ditches or washouts. Those sort of things. Where an off-road van tends to sit higher. The chassis tends to be a lot more solid. The suspension setup is usually better and it has bigger wheels, more robust tyres, all those sort of things. So they stand up to the work quite a bit. So if you're going to go just on an occasional dirt road, a standard van will be fine. If you're going on something really rough, yes, I would certainly look at an off-road van.
Would there be any disadvantages if you bought an off-road van, if say, 70% of the time you would just be doing normal caravanning and camping, but 30% of the time you do want to go off-road, would you still be getting an off-road van? Does that make sense what I'm saying? Is there any disadvantage to using an off-road van daily?
It gets back to what you're wanting out of the van.
Okay.
As I said, mine's an off-road van. We've been up the Unadata track and out to Dalhousie Springs and been on some very rough tracks. And that's why it's so small, because I can tow it on very rough tracks. I can fit it between trees and rocks and things much easier. With the bigger vans, you wouldn't even consider taking it where I've taken my van.
Yeah, right.
But
okay.
You've got to look at how much you're going to use it. We like bush camping.
Yeah.
And bush camping usually means going down a track of some sort, and getting that van down that track usually means it's got to be higher because you've got washouts. It usually means there's going to be some rocks and things you've got to go over. So all those things you have to consider. But if you're not likely to do that, then just get a standard van. It really depends, as I said, on what your needs are. And also you've got to look at what you're towing with too, because an off-road van will be heavier than a standard caravan of the same size and layout. You'll probably gain another 500-600 kilos at least.
Okay.
So by standard van, you just mean it's probably got highway tyres. It hasn't got as much clearance. It's highway suspension.
That's right. It's just got plain springs, a simple beam axle. Although mine's got a beam axle, but it's a heavy duty beam axle. It's a 50 mil solid beam axle, whereas some vans only have about a 40 mil beam axle and just small bearings on the wheels and 12-inch wheel, 14-inch wheels, I should say.
What's a beam axle?
A beam axle is the axle that goes from one tyre across to the other, whereas independent suspension, there's no axle between.
Right.
Yeah.
So the independent suspension ones are better, but they are much more expensive. And the reason I didn't go for that on mine was not just the cost, it's the fact that if you happen to break a component out in the bush, a leaf spring and a beam axle is easier to fix than having to get parts in for your independent suspension. And that's why I want to keep it as simple as I could. But some people like the independents, they're fine.
Yeah, okay.
Is there sort of maybe a bit of a silly question, but is there a sort of minimum size for capacity of humans in a van? Like, the only reason why I asked that is because a lot of people that I know, just sort of through chatting at work and friends and stuff, have been looking at secondhand vans on Gumtree that they want to completely gut and then redeck out. And if they've got like a small van but they want to try and put 6 berths in it and maximize their space, is there actually, can you actually do that, or are you sort of looking at minimum sizes for people per person in the van?
Yeah, I suppose you would be. If you're looking at a van that's only small, let's take my van as an example. It's only 3.5 metres long. There's no way I could do anything to that van apart from making fold-out ends that could fit a family in there. It's got a small double bed in it and a small kitchen, and we've got about 1 metre of space on the floor. That's all we need.
Yeah.
But there's nothing you can do to make that bigger unless you build the van bigger. So, yes, if you've looking at expanding your size of your van just by changing the layout, you could, I suppose. I mean, where I used to work, we would take double beds out and put in bunks. That would create a family van. There'd be mum and dad and 2 kids. And straight away there's 4 beds in it instead of just 2. So those sort of things you can do. But the size of the van will depict what you do. Yeah. There's no real minimum size for that.
Okay. Awesome.
And generally what comes with the van, like is it safe to assume every caravan will come with some sort of kitchen, some sort of bed, not always a toilet facility though?
It's funny you should mention that, because going back a few years, everything that you would add to a van, for example, your awning, your air conditioner, you might have wanted a microwave, they're all accessories. So you ordered the van, then you said, look, I want this, and they come in. These days it all comes with the van.
Okay.
And
air conditioner sounds a bit fancy though, Kev.
Oh yeah, no, they can't. Well, I haven't got one of those, unfortunately. But some they have air conditioners, split systems as well as rooftops, and
This is run by solar or
no. Those ones would have to be in a powered site. Air conditioners, because even with inverters, you'd have to have massive batteries to run the things, or a generator, and of course generators are often frowned upon in national parks. So that air conditioner definitely for a powered site.
Okay, so I guess I'm right in saying if you're going to get a caravan and you say I want the air conditioner, I want all these extra things, the same reason you need to consider what your vehicle can tow. You need to consider what power you've got available to you to run all these things as well. And if you don't have 240 volt power and you want to go bush camping, you're going to need a very big solar array or
or a generator or something if you want to run it. So it gets back to what you're looking for if you're wanting to do bush camping, or if you're wanting to stay just at caravan parks. Some people do that. That's all they want to do. They don't like the idea of camping out in the bush. They want to rather stay there where there's showers and toilets and all the modcon shops just down the road and so on and so on.
Okay.
So you did touch on majority of new vans these days will come with most of the amenities and pretty much sort of everything you need. I'm assuming that includes like the gas bottles, full regulation system, kitchen, all that sort of jazz.
Yes.
In terms of buying, say, a secondhand caravan, what should people be looking for primarily when they're looking at a used van to make sure they're not sort of buying a lemon, I guess?
The big issue with caravans, if you go back a few years to some of the earlier models, was that the caulking and sealants they used had a short lifespan. You might have gotten 10, 15 years out of it, and then it would start to shrink and crack and allow water to enter into the van. So if I was looking at a secondhand van, the first thing I would look at, if it was what I was looking for, is any water leaks. So, and that's obvious by water stains inside, particularly around the corners of the van and around the roof corners. A water stain is a sure sign that water is getting in somewhere.
Okay.
And it might be around the windows, might be around the frames, the doors, the corners. Open the cupboard doors and look in the back because you can see water stains running along the bottom of the wall.
Yeah,
and that's
right,
a sure sign you've got a water leak.
Okay.
Now, that's the first thing I would look for. But otherwise, it's just overall condition of the van. Make sure that everything runs. If you've got it somewhere where they can plug the power in, it's got an air conditioner, make sure it's running. Ask them to run the fridge for at least a couple of hours before you get there.
Right.
Because they can take a little while to cool down, the fridges and caravans. So need to make sure they're running. And these things are all very expensive to repair when you get it home.
Yeah, okay.
If it's from a dealer, you can probably take it back. But if you don't buy it privately, you really need to make sure everything's there. And look underneath, have a look at the suspension, look at the condition of the underside. Any pipes are under there. There's pipes, hoses, water tanks. Is the water tank battered because it's been on a lot of stones? Shock absorbers, things like that, they can be battered by stones and be ruined. So just general wear and tear, much like you would look for in a car, just general wear and tear. But
you're going to see surface rust and stuff, aren't you? But you're looking for actual physical damage under the car.
Yeah, physical damage. Like I said, your beam axle, if it's got a great bow going down, that's not a good sign. That means it's been hitting some very big stuff and the axle has given way with the pressures on it. But if it's fairly straight, you're pretty good.
Okay.
But that's about the only thing you really look for.
So if you did see signs of water damage and stuff, that's just too much of a pain in the ass to try and fix.
It depends what you're spending on the van.
Okay.
We have had vans come into the workshop that you can actually see the frames down the wall with rot in them. It was coming through the plywood.
Is it timber?
Timber frame van. Okay. And the guy actually bought it for a song. It was a big van and he spent probably, several $1,000s having new frames made for it, and he still came out ahead if he was going to buy the same van in good condition.
Right, okay.
So it was further.
So it's sort of like a bit of a balancing scale, I guess.
It is. And the unfortunate thing is with wood rot is you don't know how much is there until you take the skin off. And you think, a little stain in there, I'll just fix the corner. But the stain is actually the rot is starting up here, it's going down the walls, going along the floor, it's going across the back, and suddenly you've got a several $1,000 job.
Right.
Yeah. And of course you can't just say, I'll put it back on again. I've seen the frames so rotten that they're growing mushrooms, literally.
Oh, wow.
It's got those fungus growing out of it.
And then people are obviously sleeping in there. That's not a healthy environment to be in either. No. So you mentioned wood frame versus sort of aluminium frame. In all the times that you've worked in the caravan industry, when did that change sort of switch across? So if you're looking at a secondhand van, approximately what sort of era would you know is wooden frame, and could you sort of tell would be aluminium frame sort of safely as ballpark?
I probably noticed the aluminium frames coming in, I'd say in the 90s. There were a few around before that. I mean, I started in 1986, so the late 80s, it was mostly timber framed, but then we started to see more aluminium frames coming in. It's really a matter of choice as to which van you go to. Even in aluminium frame vans, there's still timber used. The plywood, for example, the floor, it's all timber. And there's usually joining pieces or blocks put in the wall for fixing too. They can still go rotten. Excuse me. But really, I wouldn't worry about which frame was which. If you wanted to go for an aluminium frame, you just need to ask. There's usually indication where they've used rivets to hold the plywood on instead of staples.
Oh, okay.
Although these days a lot of vans are compressed walls, so they're I can't think of the name.
For insulation.
So you've got insulation. There may be a timber frame or aluminium frame in there, but it's mostly insulation. It's a high density insulation. They've glued plywood on both sides and then they've glued aluminium on the top. So it's like a compact, like a sandwich panel, and they're very strong. So if you sort of got timber rot in that, it's a big job. Yeah. Tear the side of the wall off, to get to it. But
so if someone's found a good secondhand caravan and they're not sure they want to go new or secondhand, do you think it's easy as having a look at that, taking some photos of any issues, water damage, whatever they see, going to a caravan place and saying, can I get a ballpark estimate? I know they can't put it without pulling walls off, but then they might get a worst case scenario, do the maths on it and work out, am I prepared to do these repairs? And you might still, like you mentioned before, you might still come out on top on some repairs on a good secondhand caravan.
Yeah, if you can get it for a good price, certainly. If you want to try and get a ballpark figure, yes. I mean, these days you can take everything with your phone. Of course, they used to ask you, well, I've got some rot in the van, how much? Well, it's a bit about this long and it goes that far, and we straight away triple it. We know that's going to be far worse than what you can see. So take some photos is good. And go in and say, look, this is what I found. They'll give you a pretty ballpark because, as I said, you don't know what you've got until you take the skin off. Yeah,
just ask for worst case scenarios.
That's right. Yeah. But aluminium frames are still a popular choice these days. You'll find a lot of vans that go in aluminium frames. They are probably, I wouldn't say they're stronger because I've always worked on the principle that's not the material, it's how you use the material. And I've seen some aluminium vans, particularly the early model ones, there's been hardly anything in the frame at all. There've been big gaps between the uprights and the longitudinals. And then you see some timber frames that have got the same. And you think, well, this is no different. It's still weak. And then you see some frames that have got the frames are only 30 centimetres apart. I mean, my frames on my van are 30 centimetres apart.
Right.
And they're 20 millimetre thick. 25 millimetre thick, and everything's screwed and glued, whereas a lot of vans are just stapled and butt jointed. So a lot, as I say, it's not the material, it's how you use the thing and how you put it together that's important.
And that's probably where cheaper might look the same, but they're the bits you can't see, right? It's like when you buy a house, if you're buying a cheaper house, it's probably made with this sort of cheaper ways of putting it together. So,
well, I was just going to interrupt. Someone I know a couple of years ago sold their house and invested in a brand new big caravan from like a very well-known brand, assumed that it was going to live up to muster, and it did just endless problems. It just seemed to be going back every month or two. They'd go away on a trip and it just – and in the end, they were like, never, ever, ever going to buy a caravan again.
Yeah. It's unfortunate. There's lemons in all sort of areas. You've got to remember caravans are pretty much handmade entirely. The chassis might be made on jigs, but the panels, the sidewalls, the furniture, it's all made by hand in workshops, and it's all done in modular systems, but it's all handmade. So people make mistakes. There's no robots to put a caravan together. Maybe one day they will be. But, people make mistakes. So
still room for that human error.
There's still room for that human error. It's just a matter of looking very carefully at it. And you can have two models of the van. One's perfect, one has no problems at all, and then the next one has nothing but issues.
Would majority of them be made onshore?
Majority of them are still made here in Australia. There are becoming some European ones are coming over from UK and Europe. I'm not sure which ones they are, but the majority of caravans are still built here. And I know one brand, if I can say the name, Jayco, they're the only one that has a mass production factory. So they actually have a production line.
I probably would have guessed that anyway. I think if anyone thinks caravans, that's the name.
They are the most popular because they are made in a production line. They tend to be cheaper to buy.
That's here in Australia?
That's here in Australia, yes. They're made in Melbourne. In fact, there's a couple of workshops. They've got the Caravan workshop. I think they've got the camper workshop, and of course they're producing motorhomes as well these days. So as far as I know, the caravans and the camper trailers are all made on a production line. But it's you push the van along. It's the automation. It's still not quite automated. That's what it was like when I was working there. But I guess
it's the same with many products. If you is look for warranties, look for authority around the brand, look for customer service and stuff, because you might have problems. You can't sometimes you just can't avoid it, but often it's how the company deals with those problems after that make all the difference.
Well, same here at Snowy's. There's a lot of stuff that we sell, and some particular companies are a lot better in after sales support, or even for us as retailers to deal with them and work through problems with them, even though they've got a great product. That side of things can let them down. So I guess it's a similar thing.
Yeah, backup is the important thing. And as you say, you'll still get a lemon in amongst anything that you buy, but if the dealer is willing to work with you and help you out as best they can, then yes, that's good. And in some cases, I've seen cases where the caravan has simply said, well, all right, we'll take it off and give you another one. It's just been so badly put together, and that the company has to admit this is a a heap of rubbish.
Yeah.
We'll give you another one.
Yeah. So just do your research before.
Just do your research before you go, just like anything that you buy, new or secondhand, do your research.
Yep.
And there's so many brands for caravans, sizes, new, used, camper trailers, pop tops, caravan, all this sort of stuff.
I was going to ask, you've got like is there a classification or a name for that sort of in-between range of campers that aren't a camper trailer but they're not a caravan?
Yeah, they're called crossovers.
Crossovers.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you did mention
Seems
that
like
word
an
before.
obvious name, doesn't it?
Yeah, crossing over, yeah.
Okay.
But a pop top is not necessarily a crossover van. A pop top is a van that the roof can be lowered or raised.
Yeah.
And that's specifically for storage. Some people think it's for wind resistance. It does have a slight advantage with wind resistance. Of course, your van's obviously lower. But if you look at a modern caravan, the front's usually fairly nicely shaped.
Aerodynamic.
So it's aerodynamic anyway. So you don't gain a lot. You might gain some, but not a lot. But it's more for storage. So you can get under those carports and garages. And
Wouldn't have thought that. That's a great bit of
and I believe it's an Australian design.
Oh, wow.
I don't think pop tops are manufactured overseas. Or if they are, they're a copy.
Okay. And I like the ones that I've always thought about is getting, if I did get one, with the ones that are like a little dog trailer, but then you roll them up and then the beds fold out and it's sort of canvas in the top third of them or whatever. They seem like a good option for people that might have smaller cars.
They are. It can be a bit deceiving because they're a wind-up camper.
Yeah.
Excuse me. And even though they're smaller, they actually may be quite heavy.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I've seen camper trailers weighing well over the ton.
Wow.
With all the gear you put it in, as we spoke before, you look at the loaded weight of it. And yes, when you've got an off-road camper trailer, all the gear on it weighs 1,200 kilos. I've got a little car, I can tow 1,000 kilos, straight away you're out of the ball game.
Yeah,
so just
because it's a smaller option or a more compact option doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for a smaller car.
No, you really have to, once again, check the weights to see what it weighs and see what your car can do, and then you can go from there.
I've got one more question.
Yep.
People buy a secondhand caravan, they probably got all these ideas, all these modifications and things.
Yes.
What's the one thing you'd say don't do or the craziest at-home modifications someone's done to their caravan that you've looked at and gone, you are going to hurt yourself and all the people around you?
Or you're going to regret this later.
It does worry me when you see a caravan with a fold-up boat trailer stuck on the back of the van. That can weigh a couple of 100 kilos, or probably not a couple of 100 kilos. I don't really know what they weigh, but that's adding a lot of weight behind the axle. So as weight goes behind the axle, it comes off the front of the axle, and you may end up with a tail-heavy caravan. We had a guy come in. One of the jobs I used to do was quote for insurance work, and a guy came in. The caravan swayed, and he hit a pole with it. And when he was unhooking it, he had to put the rear stabilizers down. I said, "Well, why did you do that?" He said, "Oh, there was a little tip up."
Oh my gosh!
And I said, "Really? Without anyone in it?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "What's in the back?" So, all the toys, the tarps, the things all under the bed. I said, "Take them out." Yeah, that's why your van's swayed, That's the first thing you should not do is make the van tail heavy.
Oh, my gosh.
And also to a point, make it too nose heavy. People put outboard motors on the drawbar or big generators and things like this. Or they put an extra big toolbox under it, and then they suddenly got 300 kilos on the tow bar. And
so you got to what's in. So it sounds like weight distribution is the big thing, and you've got to stay under that weight, which we'll do another episode on, and you've got to pack it right in the caravan.
Load it carefully. Don't make it tail heavy. There's an interesting YouTube. I can't really tell you what the link is, but they have a little model car on a conveyor belt with a trailer on.
I've seen that.
You've seen that?
Yeah.
And the car's going along happily.
Put it in the show
and
notes.
They have their little weight, and they put it in the front of the trailer and it sits there okay. Then they put it in the middle, it sits okay. Then they put it on the back and the little car's going like this all over the conveyor belt. And it's a typical thing. They're saying don't make the van tail heavy.
It's really
some weight.
Isn't it?
Try to maintain 10% or round about that figure as a basis. You've got to have some weight on the front of your van to give you stable.
Okay.
And on electrical and plumbing too, like gas, there are regulations around the gas. You can't go modify gas in your caravan. No. What about electrical? It's 12 volts. So are you
12 volt you're fine with. There's no regulations on 12 volt. But if you want to add a power point or do something like that, yes, it has to be done by a licensed operator.
Okay. Yep. So if you want to put a 12 volt water pump in or something like that yourself, you're fine.
12 volt water pump.
But if you're plugging your toaster into a 240 volt
power point.
If you suddenly think, I want to put a power point down there, and you sort of find out some way I'll run it down under the cupboard and put the power point down there, then that's a no-no.
Okay.
And there's certain criteria, for example, a power point in caravans must be double pole. They can't be single pole, which is what a household
Yep.
power point is.
Yep.
Okay.
There's other regulations too about going through walls. You got to have protection around the walls, through the frame, this sort of thing. So
Stick with 12 volt.
Stick with 12 volt. These days, there's so many options for 12 volt. 12 volt televisions, 12 volt microwaves. Inverters. If you do want to rub something, and you have a good battery system, it's so much easier to fit that in than playing around with licensing.
Yeah.
Because if someone gets hurt, you could be up for negligence and you could be up for criminal charges too.
Yeah, right.
So
Okay.
you've got to be really, really careful. Don't
business.
modify your 240 volt or your gas without a license. Yeah.
Do you know that raises another question for me? And producers, you're saying we got to wind this up, but the way you plug a Caravan into a 240 volt source, right? There's adapters and there's a difference in the amperage and everything.
That's right.
Can you explain in layman's terms to people why they can't just plug their Caravan into a 240 volt source?
Then Caravan inlet is 15 amps, which means the plug has got a very large earth pin.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from what I remember, the understanding of that is if there's a short in the Caravan, if a screw is touching the power cord and the aluminium cladding, the short will run down the heavy earth pin to a circuit breaker in the Caravan park and trip the circuit breaker.
Okay.
That's the theory behind it. It's always been like that. Caravans have always had this very heavy earth pin. So obviously if you have a 10 amp socket, you are downgrading that system and that is illegal.
And 10 amp is your regular 240 volt
household.
house.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the way around it is, like you say, you need to have an approved adapter, which has a circuit breaker built into it. So in case there's a breakage or a short, it'll trip it like that. Or you need to have a 15 amp socket of some sort put on the side of your shed or the side of your house or somewhere where you can plug the van in by an electrician.
Okay.
That's about the only legal way you can do it. Some people do make their own and that's illegal. I've seen PowerPoints, 15 amps they trim the earth pin down, and to make it fit in the 10 amp socket.
Yeah.
That's very dangerous. So don't
do
grade a system. It's
yourself and the people around you.
That's right.
Fires happen.
Safety is paramount.
And
you don't want to have be the end of everything,
Definitely.
And also, once again, you could be up for criminal charges.
There you go.
Yeah. If you downgrade the system deliberately.
Safety should be the first
thing.
Safety,
absolutely,
I don't have any more questions.
I probably just have one.
Yes.
Sorry, Emily. The ongoing costs. So people are thinking about upgrading from their tents and whatever.
Yes.
So you've got your storage.
Yes.
If you need to store your caravan safely, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
You're registering your caravan.
That's right.
Is there any sort of other ongoing or regular maintenance costs for a van that people would need to factor in?
Well, just like a car, the van needs to be serviced every now and then. It has got mechanics on it, so brakes, bearings, those sort of things. Fridges, air conditioners, all those sort of things should be looked at occasionally, which can be done during a servicing. Yes, I think you pretty much covered it though. Apart from storage, insurance, registration, and just basic upkeep. Servicing.
Would you service it sort of every time you service your car? Or would it be like a major service type kind of cycle?
Regular cycles, I think it goes more on kilometres than timing.
Okay.
If you buy a new van, that should be in your handbook that comes with it.
Yep.
But we used to work for people who had secondhand vans, we say, look, every 15,000 Ks, get it serviced.
Okay.
Just to make sure bearings and things run a long time, but it's just good to keep an eye on them. Because on the trailer behind you don't know what's happening until suddenly you see all this smoke pouring out from behind the van because the bearing's seized up and you're dragging the tyre on the wheel and all this sort of thing. So,
You're a long way from nowhere.
So service it fairly regularly, particularly if you're going on big trips. Keep it up to service. Get those mechanics up to service,
Yeah, that's good to know.
I've got another question now.
Poor Emily out there.
Emily, our producer, steaming at the ears. Caravan covers.
Yes.
Do you need them? Are they worth it? I've always thought sometimes there's kind of a trade-off with a car cover, right? Because you put the cover on there and then that can trap moisture under the car and they can have a negative effect too. So do people need a caravan cover?
Caravan covers are really good. Caravan covers are supposed to breathe. You find that they have a waterproof top but breathable sides. So any moisture that happens to get in there, it should evaporate out. If you get a breeze or whatever, so they should breathe out. Caravan covers are really good. I've got one for mine.
Okay.
Only because if the cost of a caravan cover might be on $200-300, it'll last you a couple of years. Then you buy another one. You put a carport up, it costs you $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. Yes, you don't need to worry about a cover anymore, but economically a cover's much, much cheaper.
Yeah.
It's just the bother of getting it on and off. And when you've got a really big van, it's a 2 or 3 person job.
Yeah.
If you've got a big 24-foot van, that's quite a job to get it on and off. But you only put it on for 6 months if you're not going to go away over the winter period, but and you whip it off and it's ready to go. But I think caravan covers are worth it. Yes, definitely.
Okay, that's good
to know. I think I'm out of questions
Yeah,
now.
we got to wind it up.
But I'm sure our community is going to have heaps more, and I'm hoping we can have you in again in future episodes, Kev, because there's a lot of stuff that Lauren and I are just going to be able to go, I don't know, let me ask Kev.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll have you in another episode, and I think the whole GVM towable mass, I think we can go into a bit more detail there and trying to help people understand that.
Absolutely.
There's lots of
really
other
important.
avenues you can go to specialising in caravanning and camper trailer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thanks for coming on, Kev.
That's all right.
It was
Thank you very
great
much.
here.
It's
If you
been
do
great.
have any questions for myself or Lauren, or in particular Kev, about caravans, please jump on the Snowy's Camping Show Facebook group. If we can't answer it, we'll get Kev to do it for you. And as we mentioned before, if you haven't already, subscribe via your favourite podcast app or on YouTube. That was a great chat. Thanks, Kev.
That's all right. You're welcome. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome. We'll catch you next time.
Okay,
See you
sure.
next
No
time.
worries. See you later.
See you guys.
See you, folks.